Yeah, this is a major lesson that I've learned being in a relationship. But this is something that I learned can go again across relationships, okay? So I'm guessing there's a theme in 2024 when we talking about relationships for real, for real. But hey y'all, so we're going to talk about some major rules when it comes to growing, stretching, and shrinking. And what I mean by growing, stretching, and shrinking, I ain't talking about no big weight, okay? We're not talking about that. We're talking about becoming and maintaining your highest self, okay? So here is, it's a part of my leading series, but yeah, this is a major lesson that I've learned being in a relationship. But this is something that I learned can go again across relationships, okay? So I'm guessing there's a theme in 2024 when we talking about relationships for real, for real. But it's okay. We here. It's part of our growing into our higher selves. So whatever. But this one, I want to talk about three major rules for becoming, maintaining your highest self, and that's by ways of shrinking and stretching. That's what we're going to talk about, shrinking and stretching, because we'll be talking about growing into your highest self a lot. So, one of the rules that I want to make sure that, well, actually, I want to give a little context first. So, anytime you're in a relationship, you want to understand that who you're with, you got to love them as they are then, whether it's a friendship. And this again, all my tea for the weeks, all the things we're talking about when it comes to relationships, it's not just talking about intimate partners, romantic partners. We're talking about friendships, family ties. Doesn't matter. You want to make sure that whoever you're relating to, that you accept them for who they are and where they are in their current space. It is important that you do not fall for the potential of the friendship, or the potential of the love relationship or the intimate partner in particular. Yes, it's good to see the potential, but do not fall in love with that. You need to make sure that if this person never changes, you will be okay as they are. Love them for who they are and where they are currently, in the current moment. Okay? And you want to make sure that as the relationship goes, naturally it's going to be, any natural relationship will have its pooling, its growth pains. It's going to have its times to grow, times to kind of stay settled, times where maybe someone's fallen and in hard times, and now it's like it's no longer 50-50. It's no longer, it's like no relationship will ever be 50-50 all the time. And or really almost at any point in time, 50-50 is kind of rare. It's gonna be whatever you got that day. Okay. That's just gonna be completely honest. But then there are some times where somebody may be going through a season where they just don't have much to give, and they're in a taking season. They're more of like pour, or they're in a pour into me season, depending on the personality. Some are takers. No, you got to know the difference. Or if there's someone is in a season of a low, so they really need to be poured into. Okay, you got to know the difference between those two. If we got to do a tea for the week to talk about the difference between someone who's a taker and who needs to be poured into, we may. Okay. But you want, one of the things is you really want to make sure that you're paying attention to when being in relation with people is these major things. Okay. You want to be aware when you have outgrown your space or capacity of your yesteryears. Okay. What I mean by that is when you're in a relationship, there is going to be, like I said, there's going to be natural growing pains, because relationships are actually meant to bring you closer to your highest self. It's meant to test your mental fortitude, your emotional fortitude, your spiritual capacity, your and sometimes even your financial capacity. And relationships are meant to test you, to grow you. If it's a successful relationship, then you have grown in it. It adds value to your life. It is teaching you valuable lessons. And some do it in good ways, some do it in not so good ways. And the ones you usually do it in the good ways, and it's a beautiful thing to be in a relationship, a friendship, and even have a great family connection where you can grow together. That's a beautiful thing. But it doesn't happen all the time, okay? So you want to be aware that when you're at capacity, when you have outgrown your space. So when it seems well and everything seems great, but when you're at that point where you've outgrown your space, you're going to find yourself the one who has outgrown the other. Sometimes it can be an outgrown here. Sometimes it can be outgrown there. Normally, if it's an outgrown here, you'll just naturally realize that you don't agree on a lot of things anymore. Okay, you'll naturally realize, hey, we used to rock and have the same value system, even if their characters change. We used to have the same kind of your characteristics I liked then. This new you I'm not a fan of, or that maybe you change and they're like, you acting different, you doing funny things. Okay, and if that's the case, it might be a situation where you've grown like this. You've grown apart, okay? There's a difference between growing apart and then outgrowing, okay? So if you outgrown someone, you'll find yourself you put in the work, you put in the time, you put in whatever it was for your healing, whether it was for financially, whether it was for emotionally, mentally, whatever. If you've outgrown someone, you'll notice that it feels like you're dragging them to come up to you. Or if you've ever been like a tutor or a teacher or even a parent, then you'll understand, like, when you're trying to explain things that are now easy concepts to you, sometimes you have to put yourself in their shoes and remember that you've gotten the concepts, but they're still learning them. And that's not always easy to remember, which is why not every parent or every person is cut out to be the tutor type or the educator type, okay? But it'll be this kind of pulling sensation. You'll find that you're using a lot of your energy to bring them into a certain place or space. And sometimes it's okay to have moments like that. But if you're noticing that it's a prolonged season of it happening and you're like, I've been trying to get you over here. I've been trying to give you ways, and they're just not budging, or they're reluctant to move, and they're telling you that you just don't like, they're either telling you things like you become the problem for them because they're like, you don't love me, I keep trying, you can't accept me for who I am or what I am. And it's like, clearly you've outgrown this person, clearly. And even this person, if that person really does truly care about you, they're going to tell you, like, I'm trying in their capacity. They may not have the same toolkit that you have. And when you go through things and you're learning certain things, you get in certain emotional developments, healing that you've reached. And not everybody is used to that healed version of you. Not everybody is used to that more abundant version of you. And sometimes for where they're at, the pace of you when you were broken, the pace of you when you were broke and financially struggling, mentally struggling, emotionally struggling, physically struggling, that place was better. Even if they grew too, it is like it was better for them to match with you, because the same pace that you've healed at, they haven't. Okay, the same pace that you've grown at, they're not. They're running a different race than you. You have to understand that it's like a race. Okay, not everybody is running has the exact same technique for running. Not everybody has the exact same speed. Everybody runs it differently, and that is okay. So that doesn't make you better than that person who is doing more of a speed walk or who runs a little bit slower in the marathon, because it's all a marathon. It doesn't make you any better. It just means you outgrown them. Your seasons in life are no longer matching. You're now unequally yoked. Okay, so at this point, it's time for you to move on. you've reached the next stage, the next level, like a relay race. The baton has been passed to you, this new version of you, this now you in this chapter. They're still used to other chapters of you. They're still kind of leisurely walking this race, or they're still kind of a light jog, and you are sprinting, or you are doing hardcore running. Y'all aren't at the same pace. If you were then, or maybe you were always faster, but they were further up at the time. And so when you may have matched pace with them for a while, and then all of a sudden you took off, that may happen. And unfortunately, it's sad when that does happen. It's time for you to let that relationship go and let life do what it's going to do with it. As in, don't fight against what the direction that life is clearly naturally going in. Do not be out of flow, be in flow of the trajectory of what's happening in your life. Now, like I said, there is the bit of sometimes not everybody's going to be running the same pace as us. So if you're not willing to slow down and match that person's pace, I'll make that clear. If you're not willing to slow down and match that person's pace, if you're getting frustrated because that person's pace is going too slow for where you're trying to be, that person's no longer good for you and you're no longer good for them. And that's because, and this is going to be a growing theme as far as you not being good for them and them not being good for you, you're now asking them to be something that they're not. You're not loving them for who they are and where they are. And they're going to feel like, and they're inadequate with you. They're going to have this sense of inadequacy that they carry with you, that you in part instilled in them, because you're not okay with the pace that they're running in. They've clearly shown you that they do not have the ability, whether it's out of lack of tools or the desire to run at the same pace as you. Okay? And with that being said, you're now forcing them. It's like trying to make a child run. They don't have, and your legs are longer, like a little child run. They just recently learned how to walk. And even if they haven't just recently learned how to walk, their legs are shorter. They don't have the same speed technique that you do. If you cannot give them grace where they are, if you're not going to be the one who's going to be willing to pick them up and carry them all the way, and that person's okay with being carried for the remainder of the race till a stated time where they can handle the run themselves, if you're not willing to do those things, let it go. Okay. Number 2. I know it's a long one for number 1, but number 2, never demand for anyone to be stretched past their capacity. Okay. In that moment. And that's the same for shrinking. Okay. So this goes along to kind of, if you're not willing to match their pace, pick them up and carry them, if you're not willing to shrink yourself for them, then leave. Because if you try to stretch someone, like if you keep dragging a child along, eventually they're going to trip. They can injure themselves. They can injure you. It's like if you keep dragging something that it's like, hey, stop, slow down, I'm trying to catch up, and they're struggling, you're going to hurt yourself and them. Because now you can look at it 2 ways. Now you're slowing yourself down in the race that you were meant to run for your life because you can't let go of them. And you're forcing them to be out of season with themselves and their life because they're either not ready for this pace, they're not equipped for this pace, or they're just in opposition of it, as in they just don't want it for their lives. And you constantly pulling them to come along is gonna create an atmosphere of heavy resentment. It's gonna cause them to resent you for either they're gonna look at it in a way of rejection, as in you don't like me for what I am and where I am, or they're gonna look at it like you're always forcing me. And they're gonna look at you as being a pusher, someone who's always forcing them to be something that they're not, or to have something that they don't want, they don't desire, or that they just don't have the means to be able to obtain in that moment. And again, that's going to fall into the feelings of inadequacy. Now, shrinking. Do not require someone to shrink themselves for you. Okay? When this person is clearly running fast and you find that you need to pull them back, or you're constantly finding ways to try to pull them back from their race, you're pulling them out of their divine order, their alignment. And honestly, there is a karma level of consequence to that. There is a divine level of consequence to that if you're doing it, especially if you're doing it on purpose. Okay? If you are purposely being the weight on someone's life. Now, I'm not even saying at a self-esteem thing where you're like, oh, I don't want you to stay with me. Or, if you do, if you're using as a manipulation tactic where you're like, oh, if you stay with me, you're going to hurt yourself. And then they end up staying because they're like, no, I can be with you. I can be good with you. It's okay. I don't want you to look down on yourself like that. Like, you could really feel like that. If they stay with you, they can hurt themselves and you're trying to let them go and they just won't go. And if that's the case, that's on them. But if you're doing it as a manipulation tactic to try to bring them back, that's also, it comes with karma. And it comes with, like, don't do nothing. Don't mess. Just like, okay. Just like you don't want anybody's blood on your hands. Anybody's unalive. Like, whether it's taking away a dream, wiping out a dream, wiping out their purpose, their destiny, their calling for their lives, their life's path, their life's purpose. That is still having blood on your hands. Or if I can't say that for YouTube, that is still having stained hands with the red juice of the body. I don't know if I can say that. But yeah, that is still, like, you still got to answer to that. In a divine way, you're going to have to answer for that. So if you don't want to have to bear responsible for that, let them go. Okay? Let them go, especially if you know that you will never do anything to match pace with them. If you don't believe that you can, that's a self-esteem thing and you really need to let go to work on yourself. But if it's not a belief thing and it's just you don't want to run at that pace, you don't want to have to go as fast, you don't want to put in the time, the effort, all that goes into keeping that pace, you don't put in the training, you don't want to do these things, let them go. Okay? Let them go, because if they don't reach their calling because you were the dead weight dragging them down and you were purposely doing so, you will have to answer for that. Okay? And for the ones, if they're willingly wanting to shrink, let them shrink. That's on them. If they don't answer the calling of their life path, of their destiny, if they are purposely running a slower pace to match your race pace, then that's something they're gonna have to answer for. And especially if it's not just a season, if it seems like it's a constant thing of them having to draw back, to shrink, to slow down. Now, this could be detrimental for them, because if they now start to train themselves to run at this slower pace, then they can fall into habit and it becomes a way of being that it's hard for them to eventually break out of, because now you're so used to running at this slower pace. You've trained your body to now run this way that you no longer have the capacity. It's going to hurt more, expend more energy to learn how to retrain yourself to run at the pace that you were originally at. Okay. So it's detrimental to shrink yourself outside of a pointed season, or to be the one who's being the dead weight, or slowing someone down, or having them being drawn back. And also too, if you find yourself shrinking yourself, if life is not in support of you shrinking yourself for that person, you're going to find yourself put into some tough situations where that person is going to naturally, the person you're shrinking yourself for, the relationship you're shrinking yourself for, it's going to naturally either fall out of alignment, especially if your life path, the divine order placed on your life, your divine calling placed on your life is that strong, is that needs to get done. Life is going to have a funny way of moving the person you're shrinking yourself for out the way and causing you to go through that uncomfortable training to retrain your body to run at the pace again. It's going to do it naturally, because it's like, no, you're out of line, you're out of order, you're out of purpose. We're going to move this person out the way. So whether it's because they're now resenting you because they see you slowing down for them, and now it's causing a level of resentment because it's like they kind of take it as you're pitying them. Or maybe they just naturally find someone who they vibe a little bit better with, who does, they can tell it's a natural thing. They're like, you don't seem like you're constantly like, oh, let me come make myself small for you. Everybody finds that attractive. Like, to make yourself small for someone, if that's not being authentic to yourself and you want to live life like that, why? um but on top of that, if it's gonna, life will have a way, it's kind of like shrinking and trying to put yourself into clothes that are clearly too small for you. You will find yourself busting at the seams because you're not meant to fit there. That space is not meant for you. You are occupying a space that is not meant for you. Get out of it. Just like if you try to put somebody into a space that they cannot fill, you're gonna be feeling inadequate, you're gonna be feeling underserved, and that person's gonna feel like they're not good enough. And now you're both hurting each other. For what? For why? Let it go. Like, really, for what? For why? Let it go. And if someone takes pleasure in you shrinking them yourself for them, and they have no intention of excelling farther than what they are, to help make sure that they don't shrink you for long, or that because they are uncomfortable with the shrinking and they want to make sure that you both are benefiting and they actually do care about you and your relationship that much that they're willing to do whatever they need to do to pick up the pace, to fill up that space. If they're not going to do that, they don't have the intentions to do that, do not shrink yourself for that person. Okay. So, with that being said, those are the three ways to being in alignment with your highest self when it comes to understanding if you're in a season of shrinking or stretching, and so that way you can measure your relationships at that level to see if this is somebody you can grow with, if this is someone you're having to shrink for, and if so, is it purposely done? Are they purposely having you shrink? Are they accidentally having you shrink? And if so, maybe let them be aware. Hey, I would like if we move like this. And if they're like, okay, yeah, and they're putting in the time, the effort, and the due diligence to get there, then that may not be a relationship to throw away. That may be give it some time, showing that they have the intention of being in alignment. But with that being said, just a quick recap: do not shrink yourself past your capacity. Do not grow past your capacity in that season. If someone is ready to grow, let them grow on their terms. Because if it is a season for them to grow, they're going to grow. Whether life forces them to, whether they do it out of inspiration and desire. But every season, and if they feel like they can push themselves past that season's capacity, let them do it naturally for themselves, and you be their cheerleader in it. You have to be able to love them and accept them for who and where they are. Be their cheerleader in it. If you cannot be that, and this person's doing everything they can to grow, you don't want to if you're that person who's trying to grow, do not overburn yourself in the way that it's going to cause like a rubber band. You stretch too far, it's going to have a really bad recoil. So you want to make sure that you're growing in capacity just to keep that stretch in there. For every 3 steps forward, there's 2 steps back, or really 5 steps back, because you tried to do more than that season, more than your capacity could handle. Okay. And with that being said, we're going to wrap that up here. Always remember, my kind of design, designing your own kind of life, and never forget to dream. Love you guys. Until next time, bye.